The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today, I had the privilege of meeting President Trump on my recent visit to Pyongyang, North Korea. I explained to President Trump that his leadership and his maximum pressure policy, together with international solidarity, brought us to this juncture. I expressed President Moon Jae-in's personal gratitude for President Trump's leadership. I told President Trump that in our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests. He understands that the routine joint military exercises between the Republic of Korea and the United States must continue. And he expressed his eagerness to meet President Trump as soon as possible. President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May to achieve permanent denuclearization.
That was National Security Advisor for South Korea, Chung Ho-young, and he was speaking from the White House yesterday evening around 7 p.m., giving the message that no one expected, that in May, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, will be meeting with the president of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. And at face value, it sounds like an amazing occurrence, an amazing change of events that both unforeseen, particularly with the bravado that the president of the United States and the brash, belligerent language that he's used with regard to North Korea. But now it seems as though North Korea is going to come to the table for talks for denuclearization. And before I get into any more robust analysis of this, I want to take a minute to treat it at face value. If the president of the United States is able to broker this deal, it would be a tremendous achievement for peace. It would be something that no one saw coming. It would be an amazing turn of events. I say all of it exactly like that because it is a possibility. But then there's also a possibility that the president of the United States can make this much worse. And it's also a possibility that what Kim Jong-un is offering here is there's more to it than meets the eye. And I think that it's up to analysts to be sober about their observations versus, championing Donald Trump's chaos theory. Because if there's any approach that Donald Trump has to international relations, it's chaos. And that doesn't bode well for the future if chaos is successful. Right. I mean, just before I go into more analysis from different voices, I have a lot of video. I have a lot of audio for you to listen to, some really good tweet threads that I'm going to read to you because I think they're very pertinent. But just consider for a second that Donald Trump was able to accomplish international peace through chaos. That not only blows away the realist paradigm in international relations theory, but it just kind of 100% undermines the rational actor premise baseline for any international relations. It basically says that a person who is irrational can be the person that brings world peace. Well, the rational actors haven't gotten it done, so why not? Right? Okay, so that's as much face value as I can give it because, honestly, it's our job to go a little bit deeper. Let's take a listen in to Robert Kelly. He is the North Korean expert. Most of you know him because his beautiful little darling daughter came busting in the room with her yellow sweater, came in marching during one of his BBC interviews. But this is what he had to say last night on I-24.
Well, I think the North Koreans actually probably aren't going to give up their nuclear weapons. I think they've put enormous amounts of resources into getting these weapons over the last 30 years. As you said, they're sort of right on the cusp of being able to strike the United States. It's a good chance to come forward and bargain. But it's also the case that Donald Trump has substantially raised the pressure on North Korea, right? He's used language we haven't really seen before regarding North Korea. And we also know that the Chinese have cooperated a little bit more on the sanctions. So there are a whole number of reasons why the North Koreans have come forward.
And I think that's a wonderful place to start the conversation. There are a lot of factors at play here. You do have the sanctions that the United States implemented, the recent sanctions that China is cooperating on. There is pressure there, obviously, but this is not a full capitulation. And I think it's dangerous for America, particularly Donald Trump, because he has the propensity of doing this, right? He has the propensity of swaggering into that summit as though he forced Little Rocket Man into acquiescence. And I think that would be the most disastrous approach possible, because it's not as though North Korea is totally negotiating from a place of weakness. They're negotiating from a place of, if we go any further, then we'll have our goal met. Which is to be able to deliver a nuclear warhead to the mainland United States. We do know that our goal will cause us to have a full-out conflict with the United States. However, that's not a position of weakness. That's a power play. And so I think it's unwise for people to assume that Donald Trump's chaos theory and his, quote, maximum pressure is what actually brought us to this point. I think it's a combination of factors, not only the sanctions, not only Donald Trump's hubris and bellicose language, but also China's participation and further cooperation with the sanctions, as well as South Korean efforts. And I want to start with a thread from Tim Sharrock on Twitter. He's a journalist with some expertise in South Korean politics. And this is what he said. It's a long thread, but I think it's worthwhile. He said on Twitter, quote, "Here's some thoughts on Kim and Trump after covering the U.S. and North Korea for the past 18 months. Number one, there was a turning point last July when North Korea said in response to U.S. flights of B-1 bombers over Korean skies that it is considering sending a missile toward Guam. Then, when the U.S. let it be known that its next military exercises might be scaled down, North Korea backed off. Number two, the exercises, however, were only diminished in size, but the U.S. and South Korea continued to train in decapitation strikes of North Korea's leadership with SEAL Team 6 on one of the U.S. submarines. North Korea responded with its longest missile test yet and a bomb test. Number three, also in July, both Koreas became aware through reports on NBC that the U.S. was considering preemptive strikes on North Korea nuclear and missile sites from B-1 bombers flying in international space. In response, South Korean President Moon demanded that South Korea be consulted before any attack. The United States agreed. Now, this is critical. Again, I'm reading a thread from Tim Sharrock, who is a journalist with some expertise on South Korean politics. And I think this is a critical point, because this is where President Moon of South Korea essentially pulled America's coattails and said, slow down. Right? This escalation is getting out of control. And in such case that the United States preemptively strikes North Korea, it is well known that the first place that North Korea will retaliate will be against Seoul, South Korea. So President Moon is not only acting in the best interest of international peace, but he's acting in the best interest for his nation. And to the Trump administration's credit, they acquiesced and conceded that they would in fact consult with South Korea before any preemptive strike. And this can be seen as the culmination of a few first steps that President Moon made to swing the pendulum back in the opposite direction. I want to continue reading Tim Sharrock's thread. He said in number 5, I'll skip some. Then in the fall, Americans taking part in unofficial two-track talks with North Korea came back with word that North Korea was willing to accept some kind of freeze offer as a way to begin talks with the U.S., but the war talk intensified in Washington. Number 6, the situation continued to escalate until January 1st when Kim Jong-Un made his offer to President Moon to open talks and send a high-level delegation to the Winter Olympics. This was an overture, but it was a response to Kim to Moon's offer of engagement from an entire year before. Number 7, from Tim Sharrock, Moon accepted almost immediately, and the Olympic truce began. What happened next was quite remarkable. The highest level of visit to South Korea by North Korean officials since the end of the Korean War. Korea had taken the reins, and the U.S. had little choice but to follow. And we all, that's the end of his tweet. There are 2 more that I'll read in a moment, but we all can remember, I just covered it a few weeks ago, the reaction of Vice President Pence when the unified Korean team entered into the stadium, where you had President Moon standing next to Kim Jong-un's sister, and Mike Pence very visibly remained seated. The United States did not want to, of course, signify the recognition of this moment. And I totally get that from a foreign policy perspective. Again, I'm not slamming Vice President Pence for that, but I think that this underscores what Tim Chirac is talking about in this thread, that the Korea, a unified Korea, they were in charge of this move towards peace. And the United States, vis-a-vis Donald Trump and Mike Pence, had no choice but to follow along. Because what are they going to do? Undermine the legitimate efforts of our ally, South Korea, to find a peaceful resolution to North Korea's nuclear proliferation? And I think this is how we got where we are today. Two last tweets from Tim Chirac. I think this is probably the best thread on it. And then I want to share some really ridiculous threads on it because Tim Chirac is not as well known. His thread is not going as far, but I think it's a very important thread as compared to other people who are simply reducing this down to the triumphant successes of Donald Trump. Number 8 from Tim Chirac. Despite U.S. misgivings and naysaying from a huge number of American liberals and conservatives, very true, Moon's diplomacy turned out to be successful. Before agreeing to a summit, he wanted North Korea to commit to peace talks with the U.S. The result is what we saw today, a peace process. And he said, end. Remember, this is, I'm glad I read that thread again because I just remembered the B-side of everything that happened in Pyeongchang for the Winter Olympics was a request to have a summit between North Korea and South Korea. Right? We covered that. And so what Chirac is reminding us here is that Moon said, we'll do it. South Korea will meet with North Korea. But you have to agree first to speaking with the United States. Wow. That's an amazing move. And to Kim Jong-un's credit, he agreed. And again, to Donald Trump's credit, he also agreed. But I think it's very critical that as we talk about this from a political analysis, that we don't allow the president, right? We can't, the president is tremendously influenced by the media. As much as he criticizes it, he is so influenced by the media. And if the media uses this as, wow, the president has done something amazing, the president should be credited with this. I've seen people say that we should talk about going to Oslo for Nobel Peace Prizes. And they're crediting, above all else, the bad thing about this is that they're crediting his chaos theory and his maximum pressure as the source for this. For these talks, as if North Korea is capitulating to the United States, when in actuality, North Korea is trying to find a peace with South Korea. More importantly, South Korea is trying to find a way forward with peace with North Korea. And this is one of the terms to talk with the United States. And so if President Trump, who is tremendously influenced by the media, listens to these low-level analyses from people who generally do good analysis, then he's likely to swagger into this meeting thinking that that Kim Jong-un is capitulating, when in actuality, Kim Jong-un is saying, okay, I'll meet with the president just so that I can have this opportunity to speak in a high-level talk with President Moon of South Korea. At best. Now, at worst, this could be no telling what this could be from Kim Jong-un, because we've been down this road before. Kim Jong-il. Promises made, promises broken. One last tweet from Tim Chirac, and I want to move to another thread. He said number 9, and for those of you who want to read this for yourself, he's on Twitter at Timothy S. Pretty easy. At Timothy S. Number 9, he says, one last point. Another key shift, also first announced by unofficial Track 2 U.S. negotiators, was Kim's announcement after his last bomb and missile test that North Korea has completed its, quote, state nuclear force. This indicated that North Korea would no longer be testing, and the United States heard it.
President Trump wants to be the leader that he wants to do what no other leader has done, right? He wants to meet with Kim Jong-un, get a commitment from the North Korean leader. And, good for him for lowering the temperature, this maximum pressure campaign, as you saw the South Korean envoy flattering President Trump, speaking to his, ego a little bit. Will someone say ego? and saying, look, your leadership has brought you to this point. But, these talks that the U.S. would have with North Korea, if President Trump were to sit down with Kim Jong-un tomorrow, what would he say? I mean, and you talk to U.S. officials, there is no strategy for what they want from North Korea. How would this go? These kind of important summits, while it would be historic, you would want to think that the groundwork was laid. And, he's going to put his advisors in a very tough position right now to prepare the ground for these talks.
And I think that's one of my biggest concerns here. What is the president actually going to say at this summit? What are we offering at this summit? What are we offering in exchange for denuclearization? Because, if you go in there with the mindset that Kim Jong-un is capitulating, then you're going in thinking that you can get everything without offering anything. And that's not how this works. It has never worked like that. So what is the United States willing to give up in exchange? Before I keep going down that train of thought, here's a tweet from Donald Trump last night saying Kim Jong-un talked about denuclearization with the South Korean representatives, not just a freeze. Also, no missile testing by North Korea during this period of time. Great progress being made, but sanctions will remain until an agreement is reached. Meeting being planned. Okay, sure. All right, Mr. President. So back to the analysis. So what is he going to offer? Because this is my concern, right? My ultimate concern is that the president of the United States is being played by Kim Jong-un. And I don't think that's conspiratorial as much as it is paranoid, right? Because if I look at it through the lens of Kim Jong-un, the only way he's going to do this is if it benefits him and his ultimate goal, which we can probably reduce his goal to the preservation of his regime, which also makes me quite leery in terms of his real goal towards South Korea. Because if there is any hope for unification or reunification in the future, then that means somebody's regime is going to be dissolved as one regime has the dominant power. I can't imagine that the Kim Jong-un and his regime would be okay with creating a unified Korea with merely democratic representation. So I really have to pause and think, what is Kim Jong-un really up to? Now, I know much greater minds, or I hope for the love of God that there are far greater minds than mine at work on this right now, playing this out. Because as a rational actor and self-preservation being two predominant keys in international relations theory, you have to look at it through that lens. How is this benefiting Kim Jong-un to have this talk with the president of the United States? And how will it benefit his regime and self-preservation to have this path towards peace with South Korea? And here's why I'm so skeptical, right? Because domestically, the politics play well for him. I know North Koreans probably only get whatever news, the state-sponsored news, so they have no idea what's going on. They have such a closed society. The individual people in North Korea have no idea other than what Kim Jong-un says. But there are plenty of top-level leaders who are fully aware of what's going on. Kim Jong-un doesn't have everyone fooled over there. And so this has to play out for his benefit domestically. And the question is, how do these two things, the peace talks moving forward, unless there's been some significant change in the underlying politics, domestic politics, high-level politics, top leadership, his inner circle, and the quiet opposition that is there, right? There's going to be some tension there. I'm quite sure it's not vocal because they would be dead. But still, he has internal dynamics to consider. So because he has internal dynamics to consider, you have to ask yourself the question of how does this benefit him more so than having the easy scapegoat of the big bad United States imperialistic power threatening North Korea and the valiant Kim Jong-un leading the charge towards the nuclear age to defend North Korea. I mean, that narrative would never get old, ever. And so the question is, why now? And how does this benefit him? Or is he a very rational actor? And we've honestly, in the United States, have overplayed his insanity. And he's a rational actor because now he's come to the culmination of his nuclear program, and the next step would be one step too far. And so this is the very best spot for him to put his cards on the table and see what South Korea is talking about and see what the United States is really talking about. If he's a rational actor, then that's how it plays out. Perhaps the nuclear program card has run its entire course and he can get nothing more out of it without actually damaging himself and eliciting a strike from the United States. But this is where Donald Trump's role in this becomes all the more important. What does he offer for North Korea to back down, to denuclearize, to disarm? What does he offer? What are we willing to give up? And is our national security apparatus prepared for Donald Trump to go off the cuff? Because there's a good possibility at this summit that he would agree to something without really realizing what he's agreeing to. There's a lot at play here, and they've got a lot of work to do before this May summit. There is a possibility that this can work out magnificently, but being the skeptic that I am, I don't really know. I'm not too sure about this one. And I think that we should go in with eyes wide open, completely suspicious of everyone's motives, and without the hubris of, great job, Mr. President, you got us this far, because this is the type of president who would allow that to go to his head and then would subsequently take that to the summit and undermine the progress that President Moon has made. That is a very real possibility. And if commentators, like I've seen online, continue to just, blow smoke up the president's arse, then this could actually turn out to be very detrimental rather than beneficial.
Clearly, President Trump deserves credit for this opening. The fact that Kim Jong-Un has expressed a willingness to engage in talks, that he is also willing, as long as talks are continuing, it looks like unilaterally ceasing ballistic missile, ICBM, and nuclear tests. That is all unprecedented. You didn't get under Obama, didn't get it under Bush. It's a big deal. And no question, this is a positive move.
That was the voice of In Bremer, the president of the Eurasia Group, political scientist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to be fair to In, I cut his interview right before he started to give the good part of his analysis. He subsequently said in that interview pretty much what we've said here, with one major exception. He hasn't given any credit to President Moon. You can go to Bloomberg.com or go to In Bremer's timeline. It's at IAN Bremer on Twitter, and you can find the link to that entire interview. But the reason I cut it right there is because that's literally all the president of the United States is going to hear. And because the president of the United States, I firmly believe, and I think you would agree, is more influenced by media than he is his own advisors. I think it's irresponsible to lavish this much praise and give this much credit to the president for these actions, because that's going to fuel his ego, which In did talk about towards the end. But again, I'm cutting it exactly where the president of the United States is going to tune out. He's going to tune out as soon as you're done giving him praises. The president's going to tune out and figure he's done everything right and listen to nothing else. And so this is where this is the type of analysis that I'm seeing from some pretty responsible people, generally responsible. And I follow In Bremer and I watch his videos from time to time. On Twitter, he said this: anyone that says Trump administration didn't foster recent Korea progress is a partisan. Yeah, no, not exactly. Right. I think you're a little too excited about this because of the, in fairness, because of the possibility of something that we've never seen before. But realistically, if you just go one level lower, one level deeper in, then you would see the problematic nature of your responses, and as well as other people with high profiles like you, with voices that can actually be heard by the president. And again, he's not going to hear the rest of your audio. He's not going to listen to the rest of it because this is the type of person that he is. Now, everyone, including Ian, including other analysts, have said that this is really about stroking the president's ego, or they recognize how South Korea in the letter and the approach had to stroke the president's ego. And that being the case, then I think it's very, very irresponsible, or let me say it this way, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we help the president go in with a level head. And this is an amazing thing that I have to say. I mean, this is fascinating that we even have to say this, because we have our first 24-hour news cycle president who isn't being guided by his advisors. He's being guided by Fox and Friends. And God, I haven't even seen what they've said this morning about it. Let's pause. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to go see what Fox is saying, because ultimately what they are saying is what the president is going to believe and act on.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning on this, really, the heels of this amazing news last night. What did you think when it first came out?
You know, I kind of thought it was predictable. I mean, we know a couple of things about Trump. One is we know he likes to meet with leaders, particularly his competitors, and kind of size them up. It's kind of a Trumpian thing he does. We also know he's actually really good at these meetings. He's had many of them, and he actually does very, very well. And most importantly, what this shows is what a lot of us have been saying all along, that maximum pressure, it was the right policy, and the president was right to stick with it.
People that are against President Trump said that he is driving us straight towards war, and now we have this.
Yeah, well, it's because they're idiots.
Oh, my God. We're all going to die. I'm joking, but I'm kind of serious. This is what the president is watching this morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is James Carafano, a senior fellow at Heritage Foundation, and he is on Fox, or he was on Fox and Friends this morning. So this is the message that the president of the United States heard. This could work out really well. It could. And if there is a peace that actually comes, that's legitimate, that holds, then I'd be the first to give the president of the United States credit for it, because he would not have messed it up. So this is, you know what it is? Here you go. President Moon of South Korea has done something diplomatically with North Korea that, while we have to pause and question what North Korea's real intentions are, because as rational actors, they are more interested in self-preservation and preservation of their regime. So where does this peace talk go with South Korea in the long run? That's still a question. But regardless, setting that aside, President Moon has accomplished something diplomatically that he has offered to North Korea, and North Korea has accepted. And now he's made and brought this and presented it to the president of the United States, and the president of the United States has accepted. So at the end of the day, this is now in the hands of the president of the United States to make or break. And so if it actually succeeds, at that point, I will have to take a step back and say, job well done, President Trump. You did an amazing job. But I just know this president, he's getting the wrong messages this morning. It's fueling his ego. It's fueling the presumption that it was his work that accomplished this, when in actuality, it was the work of President Moon. And this is going to make him more likely to swagger into that meeting with all of his ego on his chin. And Kim Jong-Un is just going to quietly, and or however he does it, he's going to knock that right off of his chin. And that's going to create a more volatile situation. Now, this is the part of Ian Bremmer's interview on Bloomberg that I didn't play. He said that this is really going to create the situation that that could be more volatile if these negotiations don't go well. And what better way for this to not go well than the president of the United States to walk into this meeting acting as though he has Kim Jong-un exactly where he wants him, when in actuality, President Moon is the one who has both the president of the United States and Kim Jong-un exactly where he needs them, at the table, talking. That's all I've got for you today. Patrons, thank you for being the real MVP. I will have something for you tomorrow to let you know what I've been hinting at for a while about what's going on with content news. I'll have something for you tomorrow. If you want to go become a patron, go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. Send me a voicemail. Let me know what you think about North Korea, these negotiations, Do you think this is going to go south? Do you think it's going to be fine? 857-600-0518. I'll take a listen to your voicemails and try to include them in the next broadcast. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care. See you Monday.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.